One of the healthiest things I've done for my music is to get into this habit of when I finish a writing day, export the draft, and then do not listen to it for at least a week. And I do this for a few different reasons. First off, if you bounce out a track that you worked on and listen to it the very next morning, you're way too close to it because either one of two things will happen. One, you're like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever written because you had the best writing day. Everything was just going well. You listen back the next morning and the magic is still there. Or two, you'll think the exact opposite. And maybe you had a great writing day the day before. You thought it was awesome. You go and listen back, and then you're like, what was I even thinking? This sounds nothing like I remember it. And then either you'll get really down on yourself for it, or then you'll spend that next following day trying to push it into a certain direction that maybe it doesn't want to go to. And I think either of these two things happen because you are just way too close to it at that point. And it's just important to kind of let songs breathe, let them have some space, come back to them when you're not remembering, when you're like, okay, I remember this writing day, but I don't even remember what this sounds like. Let's listen back. And even better, if you listen to multiple songs, a lot of times this happens when I'm prepping for a show. I'll go back and listen to a big batch of songs. Sometimes I will listen to, 3, 4 months of work in a row. And I think this is helpful for a number of reasons. When you've put some distance between the piece of work and when you wrote it, if you listen back and it's not all that great, you're like, it's fine. Because it's not like, oh, I just spent all day yesterday writing that. When you're listening to 20, 30 plus songs that you wrote in a row, you really have this clarity, and you also just like aren't so tied to the work anymore. You can better tell if an idea is really there and has the potential and you should dive back in and flesh it out some more and really polish it up, or if an idea was like, that was just fun to write, but I don't really need to take the time to polish it up and everything because I have these other 5 ideas that are just like giving me so much inspiration. So when you listen to a big batch of songs together, the ones that are really like promising and really move you, they're so obvious. Whereas if you had listened to all of these songs individually like the next day, I'm sure at least half of them, if not more, you'd be like, yep, got to finish this, got to finish that. And so it really helps you pick like the best of the best. And it really helps you not get down on yourself, at least for me, if like a song doesn't necessarily work. If you listen back and you're like, what was I thinking that day? That happens and that's okay. I think it's important to not get too attached to any one idea. It's not healthy to be working on pieces of art in that way when you're like so attached to the outcome and you're like, this has to end perfectly, this has to end up being a song. If you're listening back to something you wrote the day before and it's just like, there's an idea there, I know it, but it's not there yet. You could spend days and days and days trying to like rework that idea and make it work, when it's like you could be spending that time writing all these other ideas that are bound to like spark inspiration and work. And I really feel after like writing a bunch of music, I've finished a few songs that I have kind of like pushed into that way where I'm like, no, I want to make this work, I want to make this work. But I'm kind of done doing that now because I can see now the ideas that really work, they happen so effortlessly. You don't have to force them. And you shouldn't be thinking every song has to work. You know, Operate in an abundance mindset. There are always going to be amazing creative ideas coming your way. And if you are forcing yourself to make a certain idea that you thought originally had potential, but just kind of like slid off and isn't there the more you work on it, if you're trying to force it to make that work, you're missing out on so many other creative ideas that were just waiting for you. Not being too tied to your work, I think, is very important. And it is hard to do because, I put so much of my heart and soul into my music, and you want your ideas to flourish. And especially when you think they're going to work or you thought they were, and then you listen back and they're not there, it can be disheartening. But I think that's why it's so important to get into this habit of like putting some distance between you and your art, listening to a bunch of songs at a time to then figure out which ones you are going to finish up. And when I say finish, so, a lot of times when I write, I'll write out a full arrangement. I'll sketch out a full arrangement. It's not going to be all detailed. There might be some messy bits. It's not going to be fully mixed and polished and stuff, but the arrangement is there. There is enough to know, is this an idea worth coming back to? Is the overarching like vibe there? Is the flow there? Does it tell a story? These are things to me that consider a draft to be done or a sketch to be done. And once it gets to that point, I bounce it out, save it as version 1 draft, and then I move on to the next thing in the next day or two. And I don't listen back to that until at least a week minimum, closer to probably like a month. Again, listening to your month's work all at once, or when you have a gig coming up, going through your last few months of work to be like, okay, which ones would be fun to finish up to play out? And so adapting this practice has really helped me quite a bit. It's helped me keep the ideas flowing. It's helped me spend time on just the ideas that are really promising and are really meaningful to me. It's helped prevent me from getting caught in this loop of like forcing something to work when it just isn't. Because, like I said, I've done that a few times, and those sessions are not fulfilling. They are hard, they are not enjoyable. And I can look back now and say like, yeah, when you're just like sitting in the studio and you are trying to make something work that isn't, and you're like, this is just not fun, this sucks, but I have to finish this. Like, no, you don't. You have so many other ideas waiting for you. Sometimes it does take a little to get things going, but I've gotten to this point now that I kind of know where that cutoff is, of where I'm still pushing to realize the idea, and when I'm pushing because I want to make something work that's just not. And I can see that now. And it takes some time. It takes a lot of writing, and it takes you kind of like just observing your practice as such. But now when I get to that point, when I'm like, okay, it's not happening, I still want to finish the arrangement. Even if it's not a good idea, it should still be a complete idea. But at that point, I switch my mindset and it's like, okay, just make whatever crap, call it done, export it, you're done. It takes the pressure off when you sit down to write. You're not sitting down and being like, oh, I have to make the best thing today. You're just sitting down to get an idea out, and then you're forgetting about it for a while. And again, this is why it's important to kind of get like a fully fleshed out arrangement and sketch out, because I think, at least for me, it's kind of hard to, like, I don't really like leaving ideas half done and then coming back to them after a week. Coming back to them when you have a full arrangement and coming back to add the detail and smooth it out, that's fine for me again. But it's because the idea is there. Like, I wouldn't like jumping into a project weeks later when I've only had half of an idea there. Um, but it takes the pressure off knowing, okay, at the end of the day, I'm just going to bounce this out and then I'm going to forget about it for a little bit. And then when I come back and listen to it, it's not so like fresh on my mind and in my heart that it has to be this amazing thing that I want it to be.